Please, parents, if you have not taken your kid to therapy yet and you're going to take them to therapy, do not do what I did. All right, if you are a parent, if you have a child and you're seeing changes and you're trying to figure out, is this just normal growth stuff, or is my child seriously struggling with some mental health struggles? This is what we're going to talk about today. Recognizing mental health struggles, which, by the way, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a therapist. Neither is Kat, unless you got a degree in the last 3 days that I didn't know about.
I am not a therapist.
As you know, if you follow me on social media, I come from a perspective of a mom who's been there. And that's what I'm sharing with you. Any approach you're going to take with your child, I highly recommend talking to an actual professional and not just a tired mom. But this is a question I get a lot ever since Luca, my oldest son, and I opened up about all of his mental health challenges. Like, how do you recognize it? And it's so tricky. I don't like the question, not because there's anything wrong with the question. The question is great, because I always wish there was like a really super helpful answer, because that's my goal. Like, I want to give you the solution. And so I'm going to tell you what happened with my son, but then I'm going to tell you my experience from sitting in dozens and dozens and dozens of support groups with other teenagers, their stories, which are very different from my son's. So, a lot of mental health struggles show up as our kids become teenagers, some kids much earlier, but in most cases, it's right around puberty. And it's hard, for me at least, I'm going to speak for myself, it was very hard for me to recognize, like, is this just normal teenage hormones? And I wrote in the book that my son and I wrote together, I Can Fix This, that one of the first mistakes I made as a parent was I came from a place of assumption instead of curiosity. Not only had I been a teenager, as we all have, and so I knew, all the emotions and changes and stuff that comes with being a teenager. On top of that, my college degree is in theater. And so right out of college, I actually worked at a high school as an assistant theater director, and I worked with teenagers. And because I was in my early mid-20s, these kids would open up to me because they were like, oh, she's close to our age. So I remember so clearly sitting with a girl while she told me that she was pregnant. She was only 15 and she was pregnant and she hadn't told anybody. She hadn't even told her boyfriend yet. And she was scared to tell her parents, and she was confiding in me. And then I spent a lot of time with this one kid who was being bullied. And so I had all these like really deep conversation about this deep stuff. I remember one kid sharing with me about his parents always fighting and what it's like to grow up there. So I had this very naive thought that someday when my kids are teenagers, I'm going to be good at that stage. Like, I'm going to know, by the way, everybody should be laughing right now because that's the funniest thing I've ever said, that I thought I'd be good at parenting teenagers. Can you imagine the audacity, like the confidence I had? Like, that is some cocky stuff.
Hey, you were 20,
I mean, really. So when I started seeing changes with my son, Luca, around 12, 13, first big mistake I made assumptions. I know what this is. This is normal teenage hormones. I recognize this. We've all been through this. I know exactly what he needs. He needs me to love him through this. He needs me to encourage him. He needs me to set some rules and boundaries, all the stuff that's going to be healthy for his growth and his emotional development. And what I should have been doing the whole time was coming from a place of curiosity. I think so often we parents feel like we're supposed to be leaders and guides and teachers, and our children will follow. I used to think that being a good parent meant that I will lead and my children will follow. And what I learned that no, being a good parent means walking alongside them through whatever they're going through and learning alongside them. And so I tricked myself into thinking that I was being a good, curious parent who wanted to learn. But my questions were very judgmental, and I didn't even realize at the time.
So give me an example of what those questions would be. Like, what's a question that you don't think is going to be judgmental, but really it is when you think about it?
some of the changes with Luca were he was starting to fail classes. He was being really disrespectful to me. He was late all the time, wasn't doing homework. Eventually he started doing drugs. So my questions were, what's going on with you that you're suddenly failing classes? What do you need from me in order to get your act together? So think about those questions. Like I'm thinking, what's going on with you? Look at me being curious. What's going on with you that you're suddenly failing classes? What do you need from me? Look at me being a supportive parent. What do you need from me in order to get your act together? Now imagine, let's say your boss saying to you, what's going on with you that you're suddenly, slacking on work? What do you need from me in order to get your act together? Would you be like, what a supportive...
Passive, aggressive.
Yeah, what did you think?
Sure, yeah.
Exactly. And what I didn't realize is all of my questions were actually, even though I was saying them with all the love and all the, every single question was screaming, you're not good enough. I wasn't coming from a genuine place of curiosity because even those questions are so full of judgments and assumptions. And so what were his answers? Full of withdrawal, shutting me out. I don't know. I don't care. Leave me alone. Because nobody wants to be asked questions like that, right? Instead of asking, hey, how can I best support you today? That's you're not going to feel judged if someone said that to you on a good or a bad day. How can I best support you today? Help me understand what it's like to be you. What are you going through right now? Help me understand. So the way I wrote in the book is that coming from a place of genuine curiosity means standing in awe of somebody's story, somebody's true story. Not what I wish my son's story was, not what the world told me my son's story should be, but standing in awe of his genuine story. When I noticed all of these changes with Luca, with his behavior that obviously scared the crap out of me as a mother, right? I immediately went into, this is a problem, it needs to be fixed. This is a bad behavior and something needs to be done, a boundary, a consequence, something, because if we don't nip this in the butt right now, it's going to get worse. And just by having that sort of attitude, even without me saying those words to him, we project whatever that I was projecting that energy towards him. And so what I was projecting towards him is, you are a problem to be fixed. And that is never going to help anyone thrive, right? I think the only sentence maybe that I wrote in both of my books is, feeling like a loser has never helped anyone thrive in life. Because it applies to everything, right? It applies to the way we treat ourselves. When we put ourselves down, when we're too hard on ourselves, that's never going to help you thrive. When we do that to our children, when we make them feel like a problem, that's never going to. And then we wonder why they're not thriving while we're literally, unintentionally, because we all love our children, but we're literally pushing them down, right? And labeling them as a problem and putting them in this box of, you need to be fixed. So I was paying too much attention to the surface level, to the behaviors, instead of digging deep and going, what's underneath? And the one thing I would tell every parent, your child's behavior is a language. Every behavior is a way to try to communicate something to you. What are they trying to communicate? Are they just skipping school because they're just bad kids who feel like, pissing you off? Are they just doing drugs because they want to harm their body? And again, they want to piss you off. There's a reason underneath. And for example, with drugs with my son, what I realized, he wasn't just like partying with his friends, experimenting every once in a while because, the cool kids are doing it. I want people. No, he was doing drugs alone in his room. I would find empty bottles of wine under his bed. And then I would eventually, in his bathroom cabinet, I found a bag of sugar. And I found out later that what he had been doing is taking sugar and pouring it into the bottle of wine to make it go down. It makes me cry right now because I think about like this 14-year-old, and I'm being so strict because he's such a, I never labeled him as bad kid, but like doing all these bad things. And really he's alone in his room, chugging a bottle of wine because he just can't handle feeling all the awful feelings of depression. And then what does he have? He has a mom who's like, I found a bottle of wine and now here's another consequence. And here, and again, it's not that I was just, I want to give myself some credit. It's not that I was just like this strict, mean, like, here's this another consequence. I was asking the questions. But again, I wasn't coming from a true place of curiosity. My questions were always laced with this little tinge of, you need to be fixed.
Or maybe with your assumption, possibly.
Definitely assumptions. And until I dealt with the root of the problem, nothing was going to change. I just want to be very clear though here. I'm not saying that when your kid, well, I'll speak for myself. I'm not saying that when my kid was screaming awful things in my face, and he would agree with this now, and he has agreed with this. He has said this to me, literally being emotionally abusive. I don't use that word lightly. It is that's what it was. I'm not saying that we just accept it. Well, my kid's struggling, so I guess they're going to do drugs. I guess they're not going to go to school. I guess I'm going to just let them scream at me. No, there have to be boundaries set, right? For your own safety, in order for them to grow and learn and turn into good humans, right? There have to be boundaries, and there are sometimes going to be consequences. But my point is, if we're not dealing with the root of the problem, then nothing's going to be fixed, because I've said it a million times, you cannot punish or intimidate or scare someone out of depression or anxiety or whatever other mental health struggles they're dealing with. You can't do it. It's not going to work. So we have to deal with the root of the problem. I guess to go back to the original thought of how do you know that your child is struggling? I would say pay attention to behaviors that have changed. And, again, there are going to be little changes, like if kids want to hang out with their friends more than their parents, normal teen stuff. My son didn't want to hang out with anybody because it didn't bring him joy, unless that person was giving him drugs. He wanted to hang out with those people. But like nothing that used to bring him joy was bringing him joy. That's a big sign of depression. I know I have felt it myself, right? I'm sort of flip-flopping back and forth, but there's so many points I want to make because this is so important. What I was saying earlier about, when your child's behavior is, showing up in negative ways. I want to give an example of that. So when my son was screaming at me, right? All I could hear was, this is what's going on in my head while he's screaming. I cannot believe that my kid is saying these words to me and treating me this way and blah, blah, blah. I made it very personal. Not only how dare he do that, but also my insecurities were screaming at me. What a horrible mother you are. Wow, you're really screwed up that your kid even dares talk to you that way. What a horrible mother, right? So now I have my kid who's screaming at me. I can't even believe these words are coming out of his mouth. And then on top of that, my insecurities are screaming at me. Oh, this is your fault. You suck. You raised him badly, blah, 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 blah. And what I had to realize is that I almost had to learn to understand a whole new language, because while the words coming out of my son's mouth were, you awful, I'm not even going to say the words, but just like think about the worst things somebody can scream at you. And I hate you, you effing blah, blah, blah. What he was really screaming was, help me. Help me, Mom. I hate myself. I want to die. I don't want to live anymore. Help me. Help me. That's what he was really screaming. And until I realized that, I was going to not be a really good support system for him. Because again, it was way too much about me. I was taking it personally. I was hurt. Like, oh, it hurts that, my feelings are hurt because he said this. And again, my insecurity screaming at me, right? Instead of going, this is a child who is literally screaming for my help, but he does not even know how to process all the craziness happening in his head. I know that when I've struggled with my mental health, it's hard for me to process it. How do we expect a 14, 15, 16-year-old, who's, by the way, brain isn't even done developing yet, our prefrontal cortex isn't developed till what, like 25 or something? And we're expecting this child who is not capable of processing these emotions to process them, and expecting this child to come to us and go, hey, Mom, can we have a conversation? So I am feeling these feelings and I think it's my mental health and I would like to express to you. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So root of the problem, pure curiosity, standing in awe of their story. That means putting aside our insecurities, putting aside our ego, putting aside what will people think, putting all of that aside and just going, what is my child going through? How can I best support him today? Like, that is the key. I guess if you're struggling with how to approach your child, think of your worst day in your life. How would you have wanted someone to approach you? How would you have wanted them to ask you the question? How would their curiosity show up as love instead of judgment, criticism, interrogation? How would it show up as love? So I would look for the big changes. And I think it's really, really important that we don't think of our kids as bad kids. So many people, I mean, you know this, Kat, because you've been in my life from long before Lucas started struggling. So many people saw him as a bad kid. Teachers, not all of them. He had some great teachers, but a lot of teachers, neighbors, people that, just had an experience with him when he was at his worst, easily labeled him as a bad kid. And if you think about it, in our society, a kid who is skipping school, failing classes, who is doing drugs, who is stealing in order to buy drugs, who is screaming awful, awful, awful things at his parents, who is destroying furniture. I mean, I could go on and on with the things he did. Society is going to go, here's a label. You are a bad kid. Instead of looking at kids as, he's not a bad kid. He is a kid who is in pain.
Yes.
He is a kid who is hurting. And yes, unfortunately, his struggles, he has made some choices, and those are his choices, to deal with them in unhealthy ways. But he is not a bad kid. And the reason this is so important, and by the way, I've never told my son, you are a bad kid. I had never said that. But I guarantee, in fact, I know, because Luca and I have had so many conversations since about it. He felt that I thought that. Why? Because I did have those thoughts in my head. I did have those thoughts. He's being such a bad kid, and he's so rebellious, and so this, and so this, and so this. And that's a great thing for me to vent to in therapy and then deal with it and heal it. But I need to make sure that I am not approaching my child with that energy, because he's going to feel it. And again, I'm going to repeat it. Feeling like a loser has never helped anyone thrive in life. And the other thing is that if our kid feels, if we make them in any way feel like they are a problem to be fixed, it's going to be really hard to get them to open up. And if your kid is not opening up to you, how are you going to help them? You can't help someone if you don't even know the problem, and you're not going to know the problem if they are not being completely honest and vulnerable with you. So we have to listen. We have to stop putting labels on our kids, and we have to just come with the mindset of, how can I best support my child today? It's really hard to do that unless we're healthy ourselves. Because one thing I realized is so much of my anger towards him, when I thought I was so angry at him for his behavior and this and that, really my anger was at me. What does this behavior say about you as a mother? What is the way he's behaving, the way he's treating you, the choices, unhealthy choices he's making right now? What does that say about you as a mother? That's where my anger really was. I took it out on him. I thought I was angry at him. And sure, there was frustration there. But most of that rage I felt was my own insecurity screaming, what does this say about you as a mother?
And I think that we even do this with toddlers, for example,
100%.
right? But even with an older kid or older child like that, if we can just honestly take ourself out of it, it just makes you so much more clear-headed to be able to see it in a new light, as opposed to, it blinds you, I think, sometimes.
Yeah. I remember being asked more than once, and I wrote this in our book, I Can Fix This. So what helped your relationship with your son the most? Like, what's the thing that made the biggest difference? I've been asked this so many times. And my answer is always the same. It was when I stopped trying to fix him and I worked on fixing myself. Because here's the thing. It makes me want to cry, because I think about all these kids who are struggling. These kids are so young. They're still babies, right? As teenagers, they're so young. And they have these awful, awful struggles. And they don't know. And by the way, it's not just teenagers, it's kids younger, right? That start developing anxiety or struggling with ADHD, and they don't know how to process whatever's going on. And I've talked to families where 6-year-olds have had suicidal ideation. So it's not just teenagers. I just want to be clear, but it just tends to show up more often in teen years. They're so young and they don't know how to process it. And they feel so lost and so confused, and everything feels heavy. And they're having these really, really, really scary thoughts, these really scary thoughts. And then to not have a parent who feels like love, who feels like support, and when I say love, I mean unconditional love, who feels like a safe place to land, that's really hard. And by the way, can we even blame these kids? I'm not trying to justify any unhealthy behaviors, but can you even blame a kid who's 13, 14, 15 and has these awful thoughts in their head, and the only thing that stops those thoughts is drugs?
Yeah.
And then what do they hear? And then finally they feel better, right? And then the parent is just like, you're a horrible kid and you're going to end up in prison if you're like. Again, I'm not saying it's okay. I searched my son's room every morning and I removed all the drugs.
Sure.
I'm not saying give it to them for sure. I'm not saying enable it. I'm not saying any of it. When my son was in, this was really eye-opening for me. When my son was in a residential treatment center, he went to 2 different ones. And by the way, we should talk at some point, we don't have time in this episode, about those wilderness camps versus residential treatment centers.
That would be interesting.
Because, man, there's a lot of abuse that happens in some of those places that parents send their kids to. Please, if your child needs support that's outside of your home, make sure that it is an actual place with actual doctors and therapists, and not a place that's going to fix or punish your child. There's some scary stuff out there, but that's for another episode. To know. And anyway, but when he was in his first residential treatment center, and he had been there for 6 weeks, and every week we did a family session together, I would drive in, and we're sitting there, and he's supposed to go home the next week, and he had made so much progress, and obviously he was, they monitor them all the time there, so he was not doing any drugs or self-medicating in any way, and he was just doing so much better, and I was so excited to have this one last family session, and then the next week he was going to come home. And in that family session, he said to me, Mom, I just want to be really honest with you, because we worked so hard in these family sessions on honesty, and I don't want to lie to you anymore. And I'm beaming. I'm like, oh my gosh,
great.
The progress we've made, because the few years before that, we were really living in hell. And he goes, okay, so I'm not going to lie to you anymore. I'm going to be completely honest with you. And he said, just so you know, when I get out of here, when I come home, I'm going to go back to doing drugs. And I mean, I can't even explain. My heart just sank. That's not what I was expecting, right? And I was like, Luca, no, that's not going to be okay. He was 15 at the time, by the way. So he's still living in my home and everything. I said, no, you can't, buddy. I'm not going to allow drugs in my home. If I find anything, I will take it away. No. And he was like, Mom, I'm trying to be honest with you. Whether you take it away, I'll get more, but I will be doing drugs. And I'm trying to be honest with you. And he was almost getting frustrated because he's trying to do the right thing, right? He's trying to be honest in his mind.
Right.
And so we just went back and forth, and the therapist is there and kind of trying to intervene a little bit to make sure that we're communicating clearly with each other. And I just kept standing my ground of like, no. And all of a sudden, Luca breaks down and he starts sobbing. I mean, sobbing where he's like shaking, sobbing. And he puts his head down, and I mean, at this point, his jeans are like soaked with tears. Like, he is just sobbing. And I just put my hand on his back, and I said, just help me understand. Help me understand. Help me understand. And he said, Mom, if the only thing that kept you from killing yourself was doing drugs, would you do drugs? And all of a sudden, it just sort of clicked for me. Like, I knew at that point, because we had been through enough therapy together and everything, that he was self-medicating, right? That his drugs weren't just about like partying with his friends and trying to be cool, that he was self-medicating. But I didn't realize that he literally relied on it to the point where he felt like it was the thing that was keeping him alive.
Wow.
And I, as a parent, then had to understand, and it was so important for me to understand that, not to say, okay, I guess do drugs then because I want you alive, right? Mm-hmm. But just to open my eyes to, in my mind, these drugs were a problem, but in his mind, the drugs were a solution. I mean, he told me so many times after that, sometimes I just felt like I needed to stay alive so I wouldn't hurt you. Mm. Like, it's so messed up in a way. Think about that. This kid, in a way, was doing drugs at times to do me a favor so that I wouldn't lose my son. I mean, that, talk about like,
Wow.
it's hard for me to process that as a woman in her, 40s. Think about a 15-year-old trying to process all that. So again, I'm not saying that we are okay or encourage or allow unhealthy, not just unhealthy, that is a dangerous behavior that could have killed him, right?
Right.
But there just needs to be more understanding because it's those moments that help me completely remove that assumption of he's just being rebellious or, he's just making even the idea of he's making bad choices, changing that word bad to unhealthy. It's just, and by the way, I make unhealthy choices every day. I ate too much sugar for breakfast this morning. Okay.
Right.
I haven't worked out in like weeks now. Like I make unhealthy choices. Obviously some are more extreme than others, but we have to deal with the root of the problem. And it just made me realize, I think another thing that was hard about that session, it made me realize, wow, I thought we made all this progress and he is still really hurting. He's still in a lot of pain.
And how do you help a child who's really a child? They may be 16, 17, even 18, I suppose. Although it gets a little tricky when they're older. But how do you help them do what you know is right for them in the best path? They're still your child and they're still your kid.
And the thing is, you can't force it on them,
And
right?
you can't really force them.
Right.
So we had a question from someone.
Okay.
And she said, it's Lisa. She gave us a question online and she said, how do I bring up therapy with my son in a way he won't resist it? But I also think about other, things that you might want to bring up with your son that you think is the right way to go.
I'll tell you the mistake I made. And this actually goes along with what we were just talking about, how people tend to see these kids as like a problem that needs to be fixed, right? So the mistake I made, first therapy session I went to with my child, is because I think he was 14 maybe when we first got into therapy. And by the way, he saw therapy as a punishment. I saw therapy as, I scheduled it right after my son told me that he had thought about hurting himself. So I'm seeing it as like something necessary to help him. He saw it as punishing him. The first session I was invited in as well because the therapist wanted to hear the parent's perspective. And that happens a lot. The first session, a parent will be there too, and then the kid will be on their own. And the mistake I made is I walked into that therapy session and I said, okay, well, here's what's going on. He's failing classes. He started doing drugs, blah, blah, blah. And I started listing all the changes I saw in Luke. I did mention in there, I know he's struggling. I know he's got really, hard things he's feeling and, dark thoughts he's having and blah, 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 blah. But I also listed all of these things that he was doing wrong, right? The drugs, the school, the disrespect, blah, blah, blah. What did that do? That immediately turned my son off from therapy. And by the way, I would say most parents do this. They go into therapy with their kid and the therapist goes, what's the problem? And we just list, he's failing classes, he's disrespecting me, he's not following rules, he's missing curfew, he's doing drug, right?
Wouldn't a parent say though that, well, those are things that are different that weren't happening before, so I want to say them?
Sure, yeah. I thought I was doing the right thing. The therapist needs to know this. He needs to know the changes that have been there. But what does that do to a kid? All that did was define therapy to him as this is a place where I am told on to the stranger. And this is a place that again highlights that I am a problem that needs to be fixed. And so Luca freaking hated therapy. Here's what yes. And again, just like any other parent, I had the best of intentions. Please, parents, if you have not taken your kid to therapy yet and you're going to take them to therapy, do not do what I did.
What would you do instead?
So I did something different years later.
Okay.
Or not years, but sometime later, new therapist, we went in and I said, therapist said, what's the problem? Why are we here? Blah, blah, blah. And I said, I'm the problem. I really want to learn how to better support my son. I could cry right now because I'm getting emotional because I wish I had done it from the beginning. You know what I mean? And again, as I've said a million times, I work really hard to not beat myself up for mistakes I made and live in regrets. But man, what a difference it made when I said, I realize that my son is struggling and I am clueless a lot of times and I say the wrong thing and I do the wrong thing and I really want to learn how to best support him. Think about how different he felt in that therapy session. He's not a problem now that we need to fix. His mom is not just sitting here telling on him to this stranger basically because it's the first therapy session. His mom showed up with him because she loves him so much and she wants to support him and she wants to help him and she wants him to thrive. And not only did I say, the stuff that I need to work on, but I said, he is an amazing kid. He's such a great kid and he has so many great qualities and I just love him so much and I know that he can have this amazing life and I want him to see that too and I want him to believe in himself too. That right there changed everything. And this kid has never been against therapy since. He's a big fan of therapy, okay? So if let's say your child, you're just haven't even gotten to the point where you bring your child into therapy, but you're just introducing the idea of therapy to them. And even in the way we introduce it to them matters, right?
Oh, I'm
Instead
sure.
of, hey, I can see you're struggling and we need to go see someone. Even that, it sounds really nice, right?
Yeah.
Kids don't want to feel like a problem, especially kids that are struggling. That's the last thing they want, right? They already feel like a burden. We don't need to be highlighting anything. We don't need to be saying anything that'll make them feel like that more. So saying instead, hey, I really want to learn how to be a better mom. Will you go to this therapy session with me? And you can tell the therapist all the ways I've screwed up and all the ways I'm messing up. And also let's have somebody that can hear you tell me what you need from me. Because I tend to interrupt or I tend to, and let's just have this conversation. Even that will make it so much easier to bring someone to therapy. I've said the same thing to married couples when, I had somebody during a Facebook Live this woman asked, we really need marriage counseling and my husband just doesn't want to go. And I was like, I wonder if he feels like he's going to be attacked. And so what if you say to him, hey, let's go because I want to learn how to be a better wife. Like let's go and talk about all the ways that I'm making your life more stressful. But anyway, point being, we have to remove all of that, your problem, your burden, your something to be fixed, your something to be solved, because that's the stuff that gets kids to completely shut down. I do want to say we are going to keep talking about this in so many episodes, this topic, because it's never ending. I do want to really quickly talk about, actually, you know what? I have an idea. I was going to talk about the good kid syndrome.
Okay.
I don't know if we have time.
Next time, I guess.
You know what? Let's go into it really quickly. Here's the thing that's complicated when people say, how do I know if my kid is struggling? So my son's struggles were screaming for urgent attention, right? Mm-hmm. The drugs, the, rebelling, the skipping school, screaming. Some kids' struggles don't scream for attention. They whisper. And that is really hard. So there are kids, and it's usually kids who are raised as labeled as little children as quote unquote good kids. Mm-hmm. Those are the kids that sometimes it's even more dangerous because it's harder to see. Because here's what happens. This little child grows up from young age, from toddlerhood. Oh, they hear parents say to their friends, sure. Oh my gosh, she is so easy. She's such an easy kid. I mean, just listens, such an easy kid. They start school, preschool, kindergarten. What do the teachers tell the parents during parent conference? Oh my gosh, I'm telling you, out of everyone in class, she is just such a good kid. She always listens. She always does her thing. Her desk is always clean. She always does her homework well. Compliment, compliment, compliment. What happens with these kids? We think this is great. We think we're building these confident kids. Here's the problem. These kids will take that label of good kid and it will become their identity. And it will become a box that they feel they cannot leave. They have to live in that box. And so what happens is when they start struggling, by the way, these same kids are so hard on themselves when they mess up. And they're going to mess up because nobody's perfect. They're so freaking hard on themselves. It's really sad. These same kids start struggling with depression, anxiety, whatever it is. And they are going to keep it to themselves. They are going to hold that. They are not going to say it because they Their role, as they see it, is to be the good kid that doesn't add any problems, especially if they have a sibling who is already, quote unquote, causing problems in their eyes, right? Who is already stressing parents out. They're going to go out of their way to make sure that they don't add any stress to the parent. And that is really scary because those kids suffer in silence, and healing doesn't happen in isolation. The only advice I can give for that is make sure that from a young age, you are letting your quote unquote good kid mess up, and that you are teaching them that they do not have to be perfect, and that they can feel all the feelings, the anger and the rage and the resentment and whatever, and then they can speak it, that all of those emotions are okay to feel, that they are not a burden on you, that nothing they say will ruin your life or stress you out to the point where, now it's a big problem. They have to hear that from a young age, because some kids are just born wanting to be people pleasers, right? And then, man, we'll quickly push them into that box, because if we have a kid who's already struggling big time, it's so easy to comfort ourselves. We're like, oh, well, this one's okay. I don't have to worry about this one. And then the other thing I would say, from a young age, talk about mental health openly, so that they know that it's okay. Oh, I've heard my mom talk about times when she felt depression and anxiety. So it's okay for me to say this. This is not going to be a problem.
And maybe also to hear my mom talk about that. And then however she did, going to therapy.
Yes.
Maybe it could even be medication, whatever it is, got through it and is now on the other side. I think there's something powerful there, because they think, oh, well, I can do that too.
Yes.
This is just right now. You say that sometimes.
Yeah. Teach the kids that every emotion is okay. And then don't try to immediately fix it. A lot of times we'll try to, a kid is sad when they're 3 or 4, and don't be sad, don't cry. Please, let's stop saying that. Let's stop telling kids to don't be sad and don't cry. If they're sad, let them be sad, because guess what? When they're 15 and maybe not wanting to open up to you, they're going to feel sad. And then we're like, especially the good kids, oh, I shouldn't be sad. Nope, suck it up, suck it up, suck it up, suck it up.
Yep.
I'm just going to give a trigger warning, because I'm about to tell a very heavy story, okay? But I think it's important to share. I had 2 friends, this was years ago, 2 brothers, and one of their father went through a hard time and passed away when they were young. And it was a long story, but it was a very sad situation. And one of the brothers just went into making a lot of unhealthy choices after that. He dealt with his grief in very unhealthy ways. And all the attention went to this brother, okay? And then the other brother, they were like, he seems to be doing okay. He's still getting all A's, and he's got great friends, and he's still involved with his hobbies, and everything's great. Everything's going great. And all the attention went to the brother whose, like I said before, struggles were screaming for urgent attention. And eventually they found the quote unquote good brother who seemed to be thriving. He had hung himself. And the only reason I share this story is because please, please, please pay attention to your quote unquote good kids. Especially if there's something happening in the home, if there's a divorce, or if you have a child. Like when my son was struggling, it was so easy for me to go, my daughter seems fine, because she was telling me she's fine. When one kid struggles, when one family member struggles, it affects everybody. Pay attention, talk about mental health openly, make sure your children know that they are not a burden to you ever, that they are not a problem, that they should open up, that they should ask for help. Like, have these conversations from a young age, please. Okay, do we have time? I know we had, one more question.
Yep, we do
that
have
somebody
a question.
left a voicemail. By the way, if you want to leave a voicemail, what's the number?
You can call 855-912-4175 and leave a voicemail for Christina.
And then we might play it in an upcoming episode. And it can be on any topic, by the way.
My question to you is, how do you help an 18-year-old with mental problems when you come up against his resistance and, of course, the medical field resistance, because he's a, quote, adult? Thank you very much.
All I can think about right now is how I felt when my son was 17 and the 18th birthday was coming up. And I literally felt like there was a clock ticking. I could hear every second ticking of like, oh my gosh, when he's 18, I lose all rights. I lose all legal rights. You can only force treatment if it's imminent danger, right? Then you can actually get involved. But otherwise, you cannot force, unfortunately, somebody over 18 to get help if they don't want to. So first of all, so much love to this parent because I get it. And when my son turned 18, he was still struggling. Thankfully, things were better, but he was still struggling. And I lived in constant fear. I lived in constant fear. And I wish I had the perfect answer and solution to you. All I can tell you is, while we can't make an adult choose help, all we can do is maybe make it more likely that they will want to. How do we do that? All the stuff I just talked about, making sure that they don't feel like a problem and, you know, all this stuff that'll just make them shut down. Make sure they feel emotionally safe with you. Make sure that they feel respected. Make sure that they see you model self-care and taking care of yourself. And then also, you know, even the way you speak to them, instead of focusing on them as a problem, just more, how can I best support you today? If you want me to help you find somebody to talk to, I would love to do that. And then leave it. You can't push it, right? The more we push ourselves on them, they're going to withdraw more. And that's the scary part. Because if we, and again, I've been there, I've done that. I've pushed too hard at times and my son shut down. If you can keep yourself from that control mode and focus on connection and just helping them know that they are supported and validating how they feel, they're more likely to open up and ask for help. My son said something to me. He actually wrote it in the book, how I kept saying to him over and over, if you need me, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. Like, I'm always, I love you, I'm here to support you. And he wrote in his chapter of our book how my mom said it so much, and he would ignore me most of the time I said it, or he'd be like, whatever. He said, she said it so much that it stuck in my brain. And so when I really got scared and needed help, I just immediately knew I could go to her. So just keep telling them you love them, but don't try to fix. Don't try to fix. And definitely don't add any guilt. Don't do the whole, after everything we've done for you. That should never be said by a parent, by the way. But just love them and validate them and make them feel safe. And hopefully, they will get the help, but they have to want it. They have to want it. I am sending so much love to all of you out there. If you need extra support, Hope and Humor Daily is the app. You can get instant support. And I'm sending so much love to your family. Thank you for being here.